This is Ken Pyle with VOD TV. We're closing out here the Parks Associates Smart Energy Summit. And we're very pleased and honored to have Karl Rabago with Austin Energy. You were just on a panel, Karl, and you made a very interesting comment about when buildings talk to buildings, and it relates to a singularity. So why don't you tell us about that?
Well, the purpose of our panel was to discuss the idea of home energy networks and beyond. What happens when the utility gets together with the information technology provider to really start providing value, sort of extracting value from energy waste and dumb energy use into smart energy use. And what I closed with was the idea that when conversations between buildings outnumber conversations between people in buildings, we'll sort of see an important mile marker on the road to the singularity. So the point is not really about the singularity, although that's a whole fun conversation itself. But the idea is just to think about conversations between buildings outnumbering conversations between people in buildings. A conversation between a person and a building today, typically, is that when they get a new house, a new apartment, or they get a new air conditioning system and thermostat, they set it. That's a physical conversation. Sometimes these days it's even enabled with things like iPhone apps, and the conversation ends there. Occasionally, if the weather changes, they'll go back and have another physical conversation with their thermostat, and that's pretty much the last conversation they'll have with the building. But there's so much more. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you weren't at home and you had your air conditioner set at your regular comfort level, but you don't need the air conditioner to run at that comfort level, but your neighbor's having a party and wants to crank the AC a little bit. Wouldn't it be much more efficient if the party house called the vacant house and said, I see you're vacant, you posted a vacancy notice, or, would you like to sell some of your excess capacity, throttle your thermostat up a little bit so I can throttle mine down, or vice versa. They put a notice on the bulletin board that says, I'm vacant. If anybody wants to pay me a good enough price, I'll throttle my thermostat up until my owners give me the signal that they're coming home and make a little money. And it all happens between the buildings without the interventions of human beings.
A peer-to-peer energy management system.
Sure, exactly. And it's possible if we transcend a certain level, and our little panel there, there was a bit of frustration from some of the speakers about sort of the myth of consumer engagement. Mm-hmm. The idea that we're going to get all this IT to come to the utility sector if we could just get customers engaged, that if they just knew how much it'd be worth to them. Well, customers have busy lives. They're raising kids and pursuing jobs and taking vacations. So what we really don't need, except perhaps for the early adopters, is for customers to get engaged. What we need is for the buildings to get engaged, because that's where we use most of our electricity.
And so it seems like this is based on a lot of work that you guys have already done. I mean, Austin Energy has been very innovative in terms of collecting data and being able to do things with it.
We've been doing a lot. As a municipal utility, what we don't spend in excess power, what we don't spend in high-priced power, benefits our community directly. That we have a very direct pipeline between savings and community value because we're a municipal utility. So we've been pursuing energy efficiency programs for well over 25 years in this utility. I've saved in the town of Austin, a kind of a city of about 1 million people, well over $1 billion over the last 25 years on power plants we didn't need to build. We're now, and one of the reasons we come to conferences like this is so that I can learn, and I always learn more than I share when I come here, or I wouldn't come. But at Austin Energy, we're always looking for new ways to save money for our customers. Two examples that sort of very much touch on the subject matter of this conference. The first is the topic of demand response, actively responding to pricing in the market by reducing customer usage of energy. Mm-hmm. And that's really much a peak phenomenon, because that's when the prices are so high. Here in Austin, about 1/4 to 1/5 of our residential customers have thermostats controlling their air conditioners that we in turn can control. We turn them off about 14 or 15 times a year during the hottest time of the year and save tons of money on expensive peaking power. One of the reasons I was wanting to pay attention to what's going on here is because we've had that system in place so long, it's time to replace it. And it's time to think about what kind of architectures are going on, what kind of thinking is going on in the information technology and control spaces. Should we repeat what we did before? We're pretty sure not. That's obsolete now. But how do we avoid getting something that gets obsolete too fast? How do we get the thing that has the best robustness against all kinds of market conditions? Those are the kinds of questions you can only answer with the help of sort of a communal hive mind at a place like this. The second...
Before we move on the thermostat real quick, so did you, how did you incent the people to allow you to control their thermostats? It's a pretty personal thing. Did they get rebates or something?
I'm not blanking. I know exactly. We did nothing.
Okay.
First of all, they're citizens of Austin. They own the utility. They know that if the peak demand goes crazy, they'll have to support the purchase of the most expensive power in the grid. So our customers, over 90,000 of them, accepted a free thermostat from us. In return for allowing us to cycle their thermostats those 14 or 15 times a year, because they're direct beneficiaries. It's really, it's phenomenal to me, because my first controlled thermostat on my air conditioner I had many years ago, I got $25 from the utility to do it. When I came here, I said, so what do we pay them?
Yeah.
And they said, we install the thermostat. It's a state-of-the-art thermostat. It's a good thermostat, so they're getting value there. But they're participating and saving themselves money over the long run, and that's kind of a nice community spirit.
Yeah, and they're helping everyone else while they do it. So why don't you tell us about the other?
Sure. The other really major thing going on is electric vehicle infrastructure installation and readiness. We believe, and goodness knows, with the gasoline prices going where they are, we're getting more confidence that the market for electric transportation will grow. What's interesting from the electric utilities perspective is that car charging imposes a pretty significant additional demand on the grid. So our first question always is, can we serve that load, and can we keep the grid operating reliably when that new load comes along? In the future, those cars are also batteries on the hoof.
Sure.
And if we had smart networks of communications between charging stations, maybe we could buy electricity from a car battery that we put in at night. Here in Texas, the wind blows mostly at night. We want our generation mix to get cleaner. Right now, the cheapest, cleanest renewable resource is wind. So the kind of challenge is, how do you run your air conditioners on nighttime wind? And one of the answers is likely to be car batteries. Charge them at night, discharge them a little bit during the day to provide electricity for air conditioning. But that requires smart technologies, and it requires relationships with customers that are based on them perceiving value and us paying the right price for it.
Well, and that's the question is, are there still some unknowns like the battery cycles themselves? If you're, are you adding to that?
There are control things. It's actually relatively, it's probably relatively easy. There have been some pilot programs. Chairman Wellinghoff from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission travels around with a slideshow where he shows a car battery being put on the grid and the charger being turned on and off as the grid demanded it. Okay. Even, in fact, going so far as loading electricity or offloading electricity in response to signals from the grid. The real big challenge will be aggregating those responses into something that's significant for grid management, because each car individually is relatively small.
Right.
But right now, I own a Volt. I have a level 2 charger that's a 240 charger. When my charger goes on, it doubles the consumption of my house.
Okay.
So it's like my one house became two. A very simple technology would be that when the air conditioner is running, the charger is stopped.
Sure.
When the air conditioner is finished running, the charger starts. My charger only runs maybe a couple hours a day to top off my Volt. So because I charge at work as well. So that's something we can easily manage around. Well, I say easy because I'm not the information technology specialist who will make it work, but they seem to be able to do amazing things.
Well, and it's
easy for them.
And it gets back to your original point about having your next door neighbor, when he gets his Volt, have his house talk to your house. Right?
That's right, or all of us on one feeder or one transformer. The value proposition gets a little bit complicated, but here's an example. And you hit on a key point, because neighbors talk to neighbors, and we're expecting what we call a clustering effect, that electric vehicles will show up on the same street. You know, you got one, I think I will too. So what that means is that transformers might need to be upgraded, or wiring might need to be increased in size. Well, those are expensive investments. Wouldn't it be cheaper to just run some charge control technology that had basically small computers attached to chargers with communication devices going between the chargers, maybe back to the utility as well, but certainly between the chargers, that said, hey, we're only needed for a couple of hours over the next 12 hours. Why don't we just take turns?
Yeah.
You know, or trickle charge, like you said. Just do whatever's necessary so that the neighborhood impact keeps it below the level that expensive infrastructure investments have to be made. At a small scale, that's exactly what I was talking about in terms of using demand response technologies to avoid buying big infrastructure like power plants.
Well, that makes sense, and I really appreciate your time here with VOD TV.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
It was great fun. Thank you.